Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second presentation this morning from in the Digital Transformation and Government Conference. We're very fortunate today to have Stephen Burt attending. He's the Assistant Deputy Minister for Data Innovation and Analytics in the Canadian Armed Forces, and he's chair of the Federal Chief Data Officers Association. His title today will be Creating a Strong Data Foundation for Defense, but many of the lessons learned here are equally applicable in most other government agencies. Stephen Burt's the ADM, Data Innovation Analytics for the Department of National Defense and Canadian Armed Forces. He's chair of the Federal Chief Data Officer Council. As an organization, ADM-DIA, okay, sorry about the acronyms, works to ensure that data are leveraged in all defense programs to enhance capabilities and decision-making and provide an information advantage in military operations. He holds an undergraduate degree in history from the University of Ottawa, a master's in public administration from Queen's University. Stephen Burt, I won't read the French for anybody who wishes to see that, but it's on the site. J'aimerais bien inviter tout le monde à lire la biographie en français. But without further ado, I turn everything over to Stephen Burt, and we are very thankful for his taking the time to present today. Stephen, over to you.
Thanks, Bob, and bon matin, mesdames et messieurs. I won't reintroduce myself. You've got it all from Bob there. Here to talk to you a bit today about the journey we've been on at the Department of National Defense over the last 3 years since I stood up this data innovation and analytics organization in 2018. The presentation falls in 3 parts. We're going to talk a bit about our raison d'être and why we stood up in the first place. Talk a bit about our strategic direction, where we're going, and where we are, where we're going, and how we're trying to get there, and then talk a little bit at the end about challenges, and I'll leave some time for questions. So I'm hoping to bring this in about 30-35 minutes, and leave 10 or 15 minutes at the end there for questions. I'm going to present mostly in English, mais si jamais vous voulez demander des questions ou poser des commentaires en français, c'est aucun problème pour moi. And I will endeavor to respond in the language of your choice as we go through this. So without further ado, there we go, that's me. Bob just told you about me. I'll tell you, after 3 years, I shaved down, so you can't tell, but after 3 years of building and driving this organization, I'm a little bit heavier and a little bit grayer than I am in that picture. But this just gives you a rundown of what the organization is from DIA and what the mission is there in terms of what we're trying to deliver for the department, as well as what the Chief Data Officer Council is, which is an organization that we've stood up over the last 2 years, I guess. In fact, one of my colleagues from that council, Ima Okoni, is talking to you next, I believe, at this. So with next slide then for me, just to talk a little bit about our raison d'être and how we got to where we are today. And this is just a bit of a capture of a number of the things that have happened along the journey to building a data practice across the Government of Canada, which led to us putting together what we've done within the department. So a variety of things on here, starting with the defense policy, Strong, Secure, Engaged, that came out in 2017, which gave a long-term vision for ensuring the Canadian Armed Forces continued to function as an agile and combat-ready force, and that we modernized the business of defense in a way that actually allowed us to ensure our government and Canadians that we were delivering what they needed from us. Fall of 2018, I won't run through everything on here, but the other major event government-wide was the Clerk of the Privy Council releasing a roadmap for data across the Federal Public Service in the fall of 2018. And we've seen departments and agencies build up in response to that since. And I will talk a little bit as we go through here about the D&D Armed Forces data strategy that was delivered in response to that call out. So the goal of DIA, when I was asked to take this job on in the spring of 2018, was really to help defense holistically, both the department and the armed forces, transition into a data-driven organization where we were managing data as an enterprise asset, which is not something we had done previously, and actually making sure that we were using it to make better, more evidence-based decision-making, whether that was for the Deputy Minister and the Chief of Defense Staff on things that mattered to the enterprise, or whether that was for operators out in the field who were able to use data at their fingertips off of their platforms and sensors in order to make better operational and tactical decisions. Our number one priority within DIA is to support Canadian Armed Forces operations, the rapid decision-making that they need to be able to do on ops and make sure that they have trusted and valid data in order to do that. And to get there, there's a bunch of things we have to change in terms of culture and how we deal with data in order to make sure that we have all of the foundational elements in place to get to that sort of view of the future. This isn't new, I guess, is the point I would make. We stood up in 2018, but the Armed Forces has been at this for a while. This is a bit of a dummy slide on sort of a view of what we're doing around the world, just to give you a sense. This kind of thing, this basic dashboarding of operations and dashboarding of what things we need to make decisions on, that's been happening for over 20 years now, I would say. And what we found was starting in just after 2010, sort of the 2012 timeframe, the Navy in particular started to get much more focused on making sure that they could do things like this in a way that supported their operational decision making. They got a grip on their data so they could look at their people issues, their material issues, and their financial issues, all with a view to ensuring that they were actually able to crew ships and get them out into operations in a much more streamlined, efficient, and effective fashion. So when DIA stood up, we already had this concept coming from the Navy of, what do you need to know and how can you get it in 3 clicks? So that was where they were trying to aim for. How can I, in 3 clicks, get the data that I need to make a better decision? So the commander of the Navy had pioneered this when he was a deputy commander. He carried this on with him. He had started to, he'd become a bit of an evangelist for the department and the armed forces, and had become the chief data officer sort of off the side of his desk while he was still running the Navy. And the deputy minister and the chief of defense staff wanted to have someone to pick up what he had been working on and drive it in a more focused way across the department and the armed forces. So that was sort of the origins of how we got to the stand-up of the Data Innovations and Analytics organization. And this is why. We were just talking about this in the green room before we came on here. And this is the defense problem, and I would suggest this is the government problem. We have too many data sets in too many systems and applications, and we don't know which ones are valid, which ones are dated, and which ones we can't access them all in one place. So right across the organization, people have had a tendency, as we've become more technology centric, to build a system that works for them for their specific needs, and not to pay attention to the underlying data requirement and how you're going to curate it in a way that will actually allow you to solve your problems better. And I think Bob and I were just talking about this. I think we probably have at least a couple orders of magnitude too much data across the system that we are continuing to maintain for no good purpose, truthfully. Which leads you into the garbage in, garbage out problem. And fundamentally, we talk frequently about data as a strategic asset. We don't treat data as an asset, right? Assets have a defined, it's a defined term within the financial world, for example. And you value it, you amortize it, you eventually dispose of it, of your assets. We need to do that with data, and we are a long way from getting there. This is where we need to get to in terms of the raison d'etre. So if that pile of garbage data is where we started, this is where we're trying to get to. We need to manage data, and data management as a practice is still fairly immature within government and within defense in particular, I would say. every successful process requires a consistent approach to planning, creation, usage, storage, developing the skill sets you need, and this is just as true of data as it is of anything else. We put a picture on here of the Ford assembly line, like that, you have to have an assembly line for your data that actually takes all the constituent pieces and then gets a product out the other end. And that focus, we'll talk a little bit on digital, that focus on product and business results is really where we need to get to, because we have not got that discipline in our culture in the public sector very often. We're building it, but it doesn't always come naturally to folks. So as you look around the wheel here with the data management at the center, we've got to put in governance, rules and authorities. I apologize, I keep looking down because I've got some notes here beside me, but we've got to look at governance, we've got to look at architecture, we've got to look at actual database systems to figure out where we store this stuff and how we're going to put them together. Issues of master data and how we decide what data matters most, where we're going to be really tight on controls from a quality standpoint, which is the next piece, of course. And where we can not worry so much about what people are putting into the system. All of that integration piece around how we actually build this stuff together, so you have a better picture when things come together and you're not just looking at individual pieces of it. Warehousing, transformation, and ultimately disposal, because we don't need to hang on to this stuff forever. So all of these pieces are being built. If you imagine that pile as being where we're at, this is where we're trying to get to. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going to get there, what that path looks like. I would say after 3 years, we are on our way for moving from the one to the other. We're not moving as fast as we want, but this is the model that we have now within the data, the core sort of data practice that we've built within my organization. This is the model for how we bring in the needs of the business from all the various, we have 22 different sort of senior level organizations across the Defense Department. Each of them has a very specific line of business: finance, procurement, Army, Navy, Air Force, operational commands, special forces commands, our HR organizations, of which we have 2. All of them have different needs, different business lines, different things that they need to deliver on behalf of the enterprise. And the goal of the data practice that we have is to support them in doing that. So we have a number of pieces here. I'm not going to go through the slide in detail, but it's available in the presentation if you want to look at it later or ask me any questions about it. We built a business model for delivering that expertise and support to all of those different business lines across the department. And I think, yeah, I'll give you a bit of a view on how we're structured, and then I will talk a little bit about the data strategy itself. So that's the business model. This is how we're structured. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but there's a couple of key points I want to make. It's a mixed civilian and military organization. B, it falls into 2 parts: that data practice, that business model is on the slide I just showed you, which sits under the Director General Data Analytics Strategy and Innovation, who is the Chief Data Officer for the Department of the Armed Forces. And then the other part of the organization, which I will touch on a bit later, is a project management organization to drive actual specific capabilities on behalf of the enterprise. And right now, really pushing on the transformation, the moving into a new enterprise resource planning system for what we call DRIMIS, the Defense Resource Management Information System. So where all our finance and material and real property data sits. So those are the 2 main lines of effort within the organization that we have built. And the other point I would make, a key point on this, is that this is not part of our CIO organization. So the Assistant Deputy Minister for Information Management, who is the Chief Information Officer for the Department of the Armed Forces, is a colleague, he's a peer. We both report to the Deputy Minister and to the Chief of Defense Staff for our responsibilities, but we are in parallel, we are not within a single organization. That creates some real benefits, I think, in terms of having someone who manages the pipes and someone who manages the water, if you want to look at it that way. It also does create a little bit of friction because we are in a zone where a lot of the things that we are working on within the data organization have previously sat within the CIO organization. So there's some realignment that needs to happen, and that's not easy on people. There's a change management challenge there. So what it does require when you're set up like that is two different structures, is it requires close and ongoing collaboration. It's not easy, but it is something that we work on, I would say, every day in terms of making sure that we are delivering through the technology and through the data what the department needs. So the model for this, the roadmap for getting from where we are to where we need to be with data is the Canadian Armed Forces and Department of National Defence Data Strategy. We issued this in the fall of 2019 in response to the call from the clerk in 2018. It's available on canada.ca if you're looking for a great read. I recommend it. I'm actually quite proud of this document. I'm only being a little bit tongue-in-cheek in terms of what it is that we've got here. And I'm going to go through it in a couple of slides as we move along. So this is our roadmap to get from where we are to where we need to be. It's got a number of guiding principles laid out in it in terms of what we envision for data management in the Department of the Armed Forces. One, that data will be a shared asset, that we are all stewards of that data. We don't own it, but we take care of it for the enterprise. Two, that data are accessible, that we can get at it when we need it, which is a bit counterculture to an organization that has traditionally, and for good reason, had a strong culture of secrecy and control of information. Which gets us to the third principle, which is that data are secure, that we actually secure it appropriately to its need and to its value, while still maintaining principle before, which is that it's accessible. Fourth, that data are trusted, that we know when we get the results off of our dashboards or other analytics tools that is the answer that we were looking for, that is the right answer, even when it's counterintuitive. Any of you who've gone down this path before in analytics know that any early analytics efforts generally are wrong. Your first efforts at doing analytics will show you how bad your data is. We are no exceptions. We need to get past that, look at that as an opportunity for improvement, get to a point where data are trusted. Fifth point on this, and last one that I will mention on this slide, is that data are managed ethically. That we make sure that to the extent possible, we eliminate inappropriate bias, we ensure that data is fit for use, and that we, where we are looking at the applications of data to decision-making, that we are considering ethical issues, particularly if we're looking at armed forces, military operational capability that can have lethal effects. So we need to make sure that we are doing that appropriately with a set of rules that guides how we do it, which has always been the case. But as you move into artificial intelligence and machine learning applications, start to move faster than human decision making, you need to make sure that you have strong rules and that you are auditable, frankly, in terms of what it is that you've done with the data and why that's driven you to the decision that you've got. So minimizing or if not eliminating black box decision making for automated tools. There are 4 lines of effort within the data strategy, 2 on the slide, 2 on the next. I won't read them to you. The point is that we need to manage data, as I've said, as an enterprise asset, institutionalize data governance, provide the tools and environments that allow defense team members to access the data they need when they need it. There are a number of sub-products that flow out of these 2 lines of effort in particular. We've got a data governance framework under the data strategy. We've got a data quality framework that, in fact, I'm approving, bringing to our data management board in the department tomorrow for approval. We've got an analytics vision and guiding principles in terms of how we're going to use data to make decisions, and a number of other things that we're developing as we go through this. The other 2 lines of effort, data literacy and skills and data culture. We need to teach people how to use data. We need to teach people how to think about data and how to talk about data. And we need to help people see the potential value here, where they are leveraging data to make decisions. We do have a culture, particularly in the command side, of gut level decision making, and gut level decision making is a completely valid thing. It's not actually in your gut, it's based on experience generally. But you do need to be open to the possibility that your gut, your experience is wrong, that it may not apply. And the best commanders are, right? They understand that they have a certain set of instincts, but they're open to the idea that they could be wrong. And helping people build that sort of experiential blend, I should say, that experiential instinct-based decision-making with more data-driven decision-making, and trying to figure out when they should trust one and when they should trust the other is part of what we need to get to on the culture side. So all of this to equip, train, change the culture of the defense team, military and civilian, to ensure they understand the value of data and to how to manage it effectively. That is the point of the data strategy, and where that roadmap is trying to get us. Change gears slightly. Everything I've talked to you from that first business model through the data strategy is what sits within the data practice, the core data practice, the core data program run by the chief data officer, who's one of my two DGs. Important work, foundational work, drives across the organization to support all of the other lines of business that are out there. Separate from that, attached to it, but in a separate line of effort from my organization standpoint, is this project management team that I've built. And like I said, it's largely focused right now on the transformation of our enterprise resource planning system, which sits in an SAP technology construct right now, into the new S/4HANA system that SAP is bringing forward and is being adopted across government for finance. But for us, our enterprise resource planning system touches on much more than finance. The materiel piece in particular has operational implications, because it is how we manage our supply chain from procurement to disposal, including getting it out into operations around the world. So this program of modernization within our ERP system is called, at the top of this slide here, the Defense Resource Business Modernization Program. And what you see underneath it are a number of interlinked projects and initiatives, all of them managed by different parts of the organization, some by our CFO, some by our procurement organization, some by our strategic joint staff for supply chain. But all of these plug into that enterprise resource planning system, which is DRIMIS, the Defense Resource Management Information System. And the core project at the base here is the DRIMIS modernization project, which will take us from the current SAP ECC application into the S/4HANA instance, which is available now, but they'll see support for the old one in the late 2020s sometime. So there's a lot here, a lot of different projects and initiatives. Some of them predate DIA. The automatic identification technology, for example, is something that's been in the works for a long time. It has to do with how we manage things in and out of warehouses and transportation. Some of them are newer. The business partners, for example, we've just stood up, which is about how we plug data from within the department out to vendors and other partners. But all of these linked into how we modernize the ERP system. So knowing the audience I'm speaking to, I'm sure it's not going to require a ton of explanation from me, but as you drive this capability, and I'm the sponsor for it, the CIO will implement it because this is all being implemented within technology. As you drive this capability for the enterprise, because it has to feed everybody, obviously the foundational pieces of it are all being delivered by that core data function, that core data program that I was talking about up to this point, that is delivering through the data strategy. So there's strong interlinkages between the two sides, but they are two different disciplines. This the data expertise within the core data program, and this sort of project management expertise that we're delivering here on behalf of the defense enterprise. So happy to answer questions on that as we go through, but I just wanted to spend a moment to take a look at all of that piece. This does, in terms of questions, just to put a bit of a caveat on it, this does get a bit sensitive because this is all in flight right now with in terms of projects and procurement and whatnot. So there are some limits on how much I can talk about some of these pieces. So that's where we're going in defense, the data strategy, the data innovation analytics organization. The final point I would make in terms of the road we're on right now is that defense is big, but we are not an island. And there's a need to work within a larger data ecosystem. And for us, that includes the Five Eyes, where we work with the countries whose flags are up here very closely in intelligence and security issues. We need to maintain those linkages as we modernize our data and make sure our data standards continue to be plugged into those of our closest allies. The CDO Council, which Bob mentioned at the beginning, which is an organization that really came from an early collaboration and just learning between Defense, Canada Revenue Agency, and ESDC as the three biggest, sort of most operational departments in government, and has now grown to something north of 25 different departments and agencies, including some crown corporations and whatnot, who are all have chief data officers and are all trying to work together to create a community where we share information related to our experiences, our activities, best practices, all of that kind of stuff. So that meets every 6 or 8 weeks and has strong links into both Privy Council and Treasury Board for how we set rules across government. And there's a reference there as well to the Government Canada Data Conference, which is an annual event which continues to grow with every year. And I believe this year involved provinces and municipalities as well as federal partners. The other point I would make, though not represented on this slide because I didn't want to name particular companies, but government, as big as it is, can't pretend that we know everything. Industry brings fresh perspectives and deep experience on a lot of data and analytics issues. And obviously we work with industry to overcome particular challenges, not least things like our ERP work. The only point I would make here about industry is that they are vital and valued partners for us in everything we do here. This is not stuff, we will never have the depth of expertise inside the department. We need to have a certain depth of expertise to be able to steer our own interests and needs. But we will always be partnering with industry in order to deliver on this stuff. So those are the first two pieces I wanted to cover off in terms of our raison d'etre, and most of that on our strategic direction in terms of who we are and where we're going, where we're trying to get to. I wanted to say a few words on challenges. Start off with this slide, which I quite like, in terms of the value of having a CDO. CDOs are important to overcoming the challenges that I'm going to talk about in the next couple of slides. And these are some of the things that CDOs can do for you. As most of you on this call probably know, chief data officers as a concept really grew out of the 2008 financial crisis and were first found within the financial sector as they realized that they had made some bad decisions leading into that crisis. So Capital One, I believe, appointed the first known chief data officer, a woman by the name of Catherine Clay-Doss, 2002. So they were ahead of the curve. Maybe that sinks my theory about 2008, but we saw them proliferate after 2008, and they've gradually gone beyond the financial world, and they've become less about risk and more about opportunities. They've become less of a cost center and more of a profit center over time. Yeah, I think like the strategic, the external facing, the corporate pieces here, I mean, strategically, we're optimizing and transforming the business of the Defense Department in my case. External facing, linking into departmental service inventories in terms of the services we offer to Canadians, or in the case of Defense, the services we offer to armed forces members and their families, because we do operate almost as a provincial body for support to armed forces. And corporate in terms of how we manage our internal financial HR and other data sets. So there's lots of important things we need to be doing with CDOs in Defense and other departments. Little cartoon here in terms of some of the specific challenges. We need to get certain things sorted in order to get the best value out of our data. And cloud is one, and it's one where we have to work very closely with our technology colleagues in the CIO shop, because we have views on what capabilities we want and what our requirements are. They have views on what systems we should use, what providers we should use, what security issues we need to worry about, and how we're actually going to manage this in a way that provides the best value from a technology standpoint. Government-wide, the challenges we're facing right now, I would break down into sort of 4, maybe 5 buckets here. We need clear policy from the center. Treasury Board is sort of the heart of data issues for us right now. Treasury Board policy on data is still quite firmly rooted in information management, which is really rooted in records management. And as we bring together all of these concepts into the ones and zeros that make up the information or data that you need in order to make decisions, we need to converge those policy sets. And right now there's still some legacy policy out there that is not fit for purpose in terms of where we need to get to. Second challenge I would point to is that we need to address and understand from a culture standpoint that data quality is a business responsibility. The data governance, the frameworks we've got for data governance, for data quality, building of a network of data stewards who are actually going to make sure that those governance and quality frameworks are respected. This is really key, and it's at the end of the day, my organization will build the concepts and build the frameworks in terms that you have to plug yourself into, but the business owners actually need to do the work. They're the ones who are accountable for delivering in their areas, and they are the ones who need to make sure that they're applying these frameworks and actually managing data for the benefit of the enterprise in a way that we have not really conceptualized previously. Getting people to embrace this change, the change management piece of all this, is another huge challenge. It is a different way of thinking, especially at the middle management level, military and civilian. People have gotten to where they are doing things a certain way, and there's a strong culture of the way we've always done it. Why do we do it this way? Oh, because that's the way we've always done it. That is strong in many big organizations, and certainly Defense is no stranger to that. So getting people to rethink how they organize themselves, how they design their work, what kind of positions they need to deliver their work, all of this is important in order to get to the kinds of effects that we want to deliver. Open data, referred to this previously. Open both in terms of making it accessible inside so that we all have access to what we need, but also in terms of making it available to citizens. We are increasingly seeing that citizens, like even more than in the private sector context where you're dealing with clients and customers, citizens expect governments to be able to manage their data appropriately and to make it available to them when and how they want it. There's a fundamental change that we need to adopt in terms of how transparent we are with people's data, at the same time as making sure that we safeguard it appropriately from privacy context. So there's a tension in the open data space that we need to wrap our heads around and make sure that we strike the right balance. And then finally, just referring again to the slide, the issue of aligning data and technology, making sure that you actually have a close collaborative relationship so that you can align requirements and tools in a way that makes sense. And understanding that people on the requirement side are increasingly technology literate. I think across the board, people are increasingly technology literate, and they have a view on what tools they want. So it has to be a dialogue in both directions to make sure that we shape the requirements appropriately for the technology folks and make sure the technology folks are delivering tools that the business actually finds useful. So to conclude, I would want to make a link directly into the digital space in terms of what it is that we mean with when we work on data, how important that is to delivering the kind of digital transformation that this conference, after all, is named after. As the cartoon illustrates, data security and privacy is a huge consideration when planning around data and digitalization. We need to figure out what needs to be restricted, who manages access, how it's stored, how it's secured, both from a, not necessarily from an inappropriate getting at it standpoint, but secured from a not losing it standpoint, which is something that happens in the data space. Data, as I've said, is fundamentally the information you need stored in ones and zeros on your technology. It can be structured or unstructured, but it is information held in technology systems. Digital, for me, fundamentally, as I've worked in this space over the last 3 years, I've come to understand, and happy to be challenged on this, that digital equals business. It's business based on technology, right? So digital is about how you work. Digital transformation, as the name of this conference says, is fundamentally about changing how you work based on your ability to harness all of the data you've got through the technology systems you've got in order to do things better and different than you have previously been able to do them. But that the primacy of the business construct and what it is you want to deliver from a business standpoint, harnessing data and digital, that is data and technology, I keep on doing this, that is fundamentally what digital is to me. It's that business objective. The point I would make is that you can't get there unless you've taken your data seriously. If the foundation of that triangle of data, technology, and business, if the data piece isn't right, it doesn't matter what technology you apply on top of it, and it doesn't matter what your business objectives are and how clearly you've defined them. You won't be able to get there until you've sorted out your data issues. So that, at the end of the day, is what my organization is trying to do for the Defense Department and for the Armed Forces, and where we are aiming to get to. So with that, I think I've left you with a little bit more than 10 minutes here for questions. Hopefully you found that useful and interesting. Comme j'ai dit au début, s'il vous plaît, posez vos questions et commentaires dans la langue de votre choix. Happy to answer in either language. So with that, Bob and Jean-Luc, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Stephen. That was a great presentation. Greatly appreciated. We indeed do have some questions for you. Hopefully they're not too technical. We'll just start with the one with the most votes. Would you please speak about what sorts of master data D&D is managing and what is unique to D&D?
It's actually a big question. I mean, the master data that we're managing, the crocodile closest to the boat right now in terms of master data has to do with our material holdings and making sure that we can track stuff, as I mentioned, from procurement to disposal. Anyone who's paid attention to the Defense Department through the lens of the Auditor General in the last 20 years will know that we routinely get taken out to the woodshed on how we track stuff through procurement into warehousing and out the door again, and we continue to be challenged in that space. So defining our master data sets around our stuff is where we're focusing our efforts right now. At the end of the day, as you do that, all of it has to track back to your finances, right? From a departmental standpoint, the deputy minister's accountabilities. It's how we are using public funds that actually is fundamental to our credibility. We spend a lot of money. We spend a lot of the Canadian public's money on defense, and we need to be able to demonstrate that we're actually doing that in a responsible way, or we're not going to get more of it, or not going to get it when we need it. So, I mean, those are the two sort of larger areas. If you're looking for specifics around, like sort of master data elements, it really depends where your focus is, because we do have so many different data domains out there. But happy to drill further down on that if I haven't answered that question to people's satisfaction.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Stephen. Another question we have, and let me know if it's a little bit too technical, and what happens. You might want to get back to it. How do you measure or evaluate data bias?
Oh, that's a great question. And I certainly don't have a technical answer for it. I think that what I would say is, I make the point that as folks may have gathered from my degrees when Bob mentioned them, I'm not a particularly technical guy. History, classics, and public policy are where I come from, and from an experiential standpoint, I come from intelligence and national security. So I've spent most of my career on the operational side of national security questions. So I came to this not as a technology guy and not particularly as a data guy, except in the sense that when you're working intelligence, you are effectively working data and data quality problems. The bias issue is really interesting, right? Because when you get into, we've got a statement in Strong, Secure, Engaged that there will be appropriate human involvement in lethal systems. That's not exactly how it's said, but it's along those lines. It's a one-liner. That's where it's most acute in terms of how you actually, that's a great sort of umbrella statement in terms of what we want to, how we want to behave. That technology and techniques underneath that in terms of how you actually ensure that are a whole spider web of complications. And I guess we talk a lot about eliminating bias. I've had this conversation with folks who are focused on issues around gender effects in policy and operational decisions, and as well as sort of related issues. You can't eliminate bias. You don't want to eliminate bias, right? The whole point of artificial intelligence is to have appropriate bias. It's that you put a particular data set in and it delivers a specific set of options or answers because you've got the right kinds of bias in. Where it becomes a problem is when you've got the wrong kinds of bias. So how you distinguish the one from the other and make sure that your data is actually crafted and cleaned in such a way that it's going to give you the bias you want and not the bias you don't want is tough. And it really comes down to a case by case, right? It depends whether you're worried about a weapon system or whether you're worried about a design decision in procurement or whether you're worried about some other aspect of uniforms. All of these things become issues. So yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer that question at a specific enough level of detail to satisfy the asker. It really, to me, it starts with the business problem you're trying to solve and making sure that you've got a frame around it so that you are able to sort of look under the hood and see see why you've got decisions you've got, and that you're able to validate it against real life. Like if it's pushing you in a particular direction, that you're cognizant of the fact that whatever's happening in the algorithm may in fact not be what you had intended.
Okay, thank you. There's another question there with respect to how does your strategy avoid duplicating effort with respect to data warehousing and analytics?
Duplicating effort. I'm not super fussed about duplicating effort right now. We need to work in a way that brings things together. My challenge on data warehousing and analytics right now is that the tools we have available aren't sufficiently accessible. So they tend to be in a system that requires a fairly high degree of technical knowledge, and you have to spend a lot of time and energy working within the Defense Resource Management Information System context in order to make good use of what the data holdings are behind there and be able to craft the analytics you want. It needs to be much more, we need to get to a situation where the analytics tools and access to the data are much more widely available and much more routinely used across the workforce. So there's an availability issue on the data warehouse. I'd like to be able to plug it. We have sensitive data, there's no question, but we need to find ways to house that sensitive data that don't require you to log in through the firewall 15 times, and in ways that actually allow you to use more intuitively obvious tools in order to deliver the analytics products that people need. We still haven't got the right, we're getting better, but the cycles that we have to develop analytics products are still fundamentally tied to the transactional system. So they're built around a cycle that is about maintaining the transactional system, not a much tighter, faster cycle around how you iterate analytics products. So finding ways to extract the data out of the transactional system, put it in a proper data warehouse that's available to people, and actually put tools on it that are, you can play with and get quick answers out of and iterate through to a solution is where we need to get to. It's still far too much in the technical domain. So there's going to continue to be overlap for a while we figure these things out, and it's going to require good collaboration, but I'm not, duplication is not top of my list of concerns.
Okay. The last question is what role do you see for enterprise architecture to engage C4ISR?
Enterprise architecture is a vital missing discipline across the system. Treasury Board now has Enterprise Architecture Review Board, which they are pushing projects through to review architecture principles. We have stood one up within the last several months. Every department has to stand one up internally. We have never paid sufficient attention to architecture, either from a technology or from a data standpoint. So actually forcing people through the thinking and the rigor of making sure that you have architected the technology that you want to use, whether that's C4ISR or anything else, as well as making sure that you're architecting the data within that larger technology architecture so that it's consistent across the board is where we need to get to. My biggest concern about architecture isn't the practice of it, which I think we know kind of where we need to get to. It's the skill sets. This is from a data standpoint, I'm basically one deep on data architecture, right, for the entire Department of National Defense and Canadian Armed Forces. Clearly not sufficient for what we need to do. And hiring for those areas where data is most technical and most closely aligned with technology are the ones where we have the greatest difficulty actually getting the right skill sets inside. Because when you buy it off the street, which you can do for some of these projects, you end up often with misalignments, so the architectures don't match up.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for your insights, Stephen. The presentation was very well received, and it's very good. And like I said, we have a lot of other questions, but unfortunately, we won't be able to get to them. Okay, so I wish you all the best, and thank you very much for your time And I invite viewers right now, as we'll be starting in a few moments. The Accelerating Digital Transformation Requires Acceleration of Data Transformation, the Chief Data Officer for Employment Social Development Canada. So thank you very much, Stephen. I'm just going to end this session here, and we'll start the other session in a few moments. Thank you very much. Take care.
Take care.
Sorry, I have to stay on for technical reasons. There we go.
No worries.
Wait for
Do you need me to, should I drop off?
No problems, no problems. Whenever.